Mr. Timmy Praise Sylva. He joins us virtually from Abuja. Thank you, Honorable Minister. And when I say congratulations, perhaps is in order at a time like this, under your leadership of the ministry, that this law has been signed. Thank you so much for coming on tonight on the program.
Thank you.
Let's begin
to all of us Nigerians.
Well, let's begin the conversation by getting to know the terms of reference or terms of action of your committee. What did the president tell you about this, and how important is this law to him?
This law, the PIA now, is very important, not only to the president, to Nigeria, but to Nigeria. But for the president, it is especially important because it actually creates the foundation for now, a stable foundation for the growth of the oil industry. And before now, what was obtainable was that there was no certainty in the sector because the foundation was not clear. But today we have a law, we have a PIA that at least sets a good platform, a very solid foundation for growth of the sector, and the president is quite happy about it. So what he mentioned to me is that we must work very quickly to ensure that we create a roadmap for the implementation of this PIB, and we are hitting the ground running.
So when you said you're hitting the ground running, what exactly do you mean? By tomorrow, for example, what would you be doing?
Tomorrow, the committee, the implementation committee will be inaugurated formally, so the work will start from then, tomorrow.
So what are the terms of reference? You said yesterday 6 months, but the president seems to have given you 1 year, added 6 more months to it.
No, let's not mix things up, Sean. 6 months is the provision for the registration, the incorporation of the NMPCL Limited. That is provided for in the law. But of course, the PIA goes beyond NMPC. There are a lot of parts in the PIA that are involved. The Upstream Regulatory Commission is involved. The midstream and the downstream regulatory authority are involved, and the whole of the PIB, the implementation of the whole of the PIB, is we are given 12 months to achieve that. But for the NMPC, the provision of the law is that within 6 months, the new NMPC should be incorporated.
So we're looking at following up in the timeline by this time next 6 months, that NMPC will no longer be what it is right now. It will have
exactly.
Absolutely. So let's get to know what will be the difference of the now NMPC and the NMPC of the next 6 months.
NMPC today is a corporation. It's more or less a parastatal of government. The NMPC of tomorrow will no longer be a parastatal of government. It will be a karma company operating commercially. So it's a major difference. The shareholders of that company will then be the Ministry of Petroleum Incorporated and the Ministry of Finance Incorporated. But it will be registered as a company in Nigeria and will operate according to the laws of the Companies Act, Companies and Allied Matters Act.
So for the benefit of an average Nigerian, because my audience are basically politicians, average Nigerians, the man on the street, and those who are passionate about this country, break it down for us to understand what then will be the benefit of the average Nigerian when it's not incorporated.
Look, today, for example, NMPC cannot be taken to court. Today, for example, NMPC is not operating under the laws of the Companies and Allied Matters Act. But the new NMPC will be a karma company. That means they can be sued. And of course, because of that, you expect that there will be a lot more seriousness within the NMPC. Also, because it is a commercial company that will be operating commercially, that will not be depending on government. Today, NMPC is the custodian of the crude oil, even of the Federation. They sell the crude oil and then they pay it into the Federation account. That will no longer happen because NMPC will be a commercial venture, completely decoupled from government and will be operating commercially. So for the average Nigerian, we'll be seeing a more serious NMPC and a more professional NMPC.
What would be the hope of those who are government workers in the NMPC now once it is incorporated?
Well, that was already taken into account. We discussed with Labour extensively in the process of drafting the bill, and we have already made provisions in the law to ensure that no job is lost in the oil industry as a result of PIA. So no job will be lost as a result of the Petroleum Industry Act. So all jobs in the oil industry will be protected.
Yeah, so what about the benefits as a government worker? Because now they've now become private workers.
Well, I believe they will even get more benefits as private workers. As you know, government doesn't pay as much as the private sector. So now being private sector will even be more beneficial, I guess, to the workers. I don't think that really will pose any problem at all.
So in this sense, I asked about the benefit. There are accruable funds from the NNPC, what they usually drop in the Federation account. How will that then happen when they are incorporated? So it's a company owned partially by the government and the people of Nigeria, just like we see in Saudi Arabia, the case of Aramco. How will that pan out? Give us a sense of what monies will be accrued or disbursed into the Federation account.
Well, of course, monies will still accrue to the Federation account, but NMPC will now have to give the Federation crude to the Upstream Regulatory Commission. And NMPC will no longer be in charge of the Federation crude. They will be in charge of their crude as NMPC crude, but they will no longer be in charge of the Federation crude. That Federation crude will now go to the Upstream Regulatory Commission, who will sell that crude and pay to the Federation account. So the Federation, of course, will still get their crude, but it will no longer be through NMPC.
Okay, we're getting somewhere, and perhaps we're breaking it down one after the other. So there's one area that Nigerians are also perhaps hopeful and anticipating to hear from you, and it's about subsidy. And there are linkages to the issue of subsidies with then the price of products afterwards. So for those who have criticized this government, that they say much, but they've done little when it comes to that, and question the sincerity of this government, because Naiti and some others have said that there are a lot of fraud covered up in the payment of subsidy. The question is that, is the government sincere about removal of subsidy? You said yesterday that you want to put human face, but how human will it be if this fraud is continued to be covered up under the payment of subsidy?
Now, of course, let's not preempt the outcome of the discussions that are ongoing. We have said that we are very committed as a government, and now we are even more than ever committed because it is a law. We must implement the law. But we want to be able to put processes in place. One of those processes, we want to give an alternative to Nigerians so that the Nigerians can go to the pump and have a choice whether they want to use gas or they want to use PMS. So that is the first thing we're working on, and the Vice President is leading an effort, and we have gone very far with that. Secondly, we also are looking at the possibility of alleviating some of the problems that might come as a result of the increase that might be occasioned by deregulation. So I don't want us to preempt what the outcome is going to be, but I can assure you that very soon we will come out and we will let Nigerians know the roadmap to the removal of subsidy. As you said, this administration was the administration that tackled the issue of subsidy. A lot of people were sent on trial because of subsidy. There is a lot of corruption around subsidy. We know that, and that's why we've tried from the very beginning to ensure that subsidy is finally removed and we take that corruption out of the loop of subsidy.
Nigerians are listening to you live. Whatever they may be watching you, perhaps on their mobile devices or from their homes, or some of them are even out of the country, and they're very much interested in what we're talking about tonight. We want to get a commitment from you, because we've heard from the vice president, we've heard from the president, we've heard from the federal government, even from 2015 about this subsidy, and it's looked like a flip-flop now. Can you give a commitment to Nigerians about this issue of subsidy? What window, what timeline can you give us? When can we see this end? Because let Nigeria feel the pain and let us heal, and let's move our country forward. Is there a timeline of the removal of subsidy?
So we want subsidy now more than us. I can see that. So can you give us an idea of what time frame you have in mind?
You are the one who is going to be removing it. Minister,
you seem to be more committed to
I followed up on the matter for a while.
I'm very happy about that. I'm very happy about that.
No, but Minister, the president has put the burden on you, and so we want to hear from you tonight. Give us a timeline. Next month, November, October, December, when?
No, I told you that I don't want to preempt the process. We will come back to you very soon, I can tell you that. But I don't want to give you a time.
Wow. My audience are not happy about that. Because you know, the government has not given us specifics.
Okay, let me say this. I cannot give you a time. Let me consult with the vice president. I will give you a time. I told you that he is leading the effort. I don't want to preempt him or the whole process. So let me get back to the vice president, and then maybe next time I talk to you, I'll give you a time.
But when you speak to the vice president, could you tell him that Nigerians are very passionate about that matter and they want to have a specific answer in that respect? But I know that this process is leading us somewhere. Deregulation, a food deregulation. How will that shape out?
Deregulation? I didn't get that, sorry.
So the law.
How did the whole deregulation process will shape out?
Yeah.
I thought that was quite self-evident. I mean, it will mean that the market will determine the prices of the product. That's all the regulation is about. So that's, and products will be available to Nigerians because there will be no issue of smuggling or anything, because the prices here will be commercially determined. I think that is really what the regulation is about, and I don't really quite understand exactly what you expect to hear from me as an answer to this question. Because
we're talking about how this all works under the new law. The wings of the government is covering the whole process, and when it's deregulated, there probably will be more transparency and openness in this. Tell us about the Petroleum Equalization Fund. What will be the fate of that process?
Well, that is also going to be part of our implementation roadmap. If we are saying that petroleum product will be sold at deregulated prices, then I think there will be actually no place for the PEF as it exists now. And that we will discuss as part of the implementation process, and we'll get back to you. Because if petroleum products are going to be the prices will be market determined, then of course petroleum product will be sold at the market determined prices everywhere. So we do not see the PEF existing as it is under the new dispensation. But as I said, we are still This is still work in progress. We are still in the beginning. So I'll come back to you when the implementation framework actually unfolds.
Well, I mean, reasonably speaking, there shouldn't be anything like Petroleum Equalization Fund any longer if it's the sector is deregulated, isn't it?
It will not be existing as petroleum. It will not be existing as Petroleum Equalization Fund. It will be subsumed under the midstream and downstream regulatory authority.
So, what will not be deregulated? Can we know that in truth?
What will be deregulated?
What will not be deregulated? Yes. What will not be deregulated in the new regime that we are entering into?
What will not be deregulated? Everything, yes. Of course, today, AGO is already deregulated, as you know. Kerosene is already deregulated, as you know. The only product that has defied deregulation up till now is PMS, petrol. So when we are discussing deregulation, I assume that we're discussing the deregulation of petrol, or PMS. That's what we are discussing. Because every other product has been deregulated. And so there is no outstanding product to be deregulated except PMS, as far as I know. But I don't know if you know a little bit more than myself. So please, can you enlighten me if there is any other product we are talking about?
You know, nothing is 100% transparent in government. There are a lot of things that are not open. And that's why I'm asking if there is one thing that will not be deregulated. And so we have you on record now. You said the one product that's left to be deregulated, and we hopefully will not find out tomorrow that there's something else that is not deregulated. But, Honorable Minister, let's take the opportunity of speaking with you and get the reactions of those who are the stakeholders in the industry. Unions are already speaking about this. And let me get you to list, to see what Pengasan and NUPENG are talking about. These are two unions within the sector. First and foremost, to talk their reaction. And let me read one of those to you. I probably will put up about 2 or 3 more for you to respond to. One of it is that, quote, the bill should be crafted in a manner that will engender competition while also encouraging local refining. We should avoid running from one ugly scenario to an uglier scenario that is avoidable. Can you react to that?
The only thing I will say here, Shehu, is that NUPENG and Pengasan will be part of the implementation process of the PIA. So they will have ample opportunity to canvass their opinions. So I don't want to now go into the matter. And the implementation process will start tomorrow. Of course, and Pengasan and NUPENG will also be part of that process. So they have an opportunity to canvass this, and I'm sure that their concerns and their fears will be taken on board.
This is not the only one I'm going to raise with you, Honorable Minister, because we need to go on break. But when we come back, more of the Pengasan and the NUPENG concern I will raise with you, plus the 3% community fund, oil-bearing community fund in the law, how that pans out, and also the exploration funding, the exploration frontier funding, also we'll take up on that. Our conversation with the Honorable Minister for State for Petroleum, Mr. Timmy Sylva, continues right after now, everyone. Join us again. Thank you so much, everyone, for staying with us right here in Politics Today, live on Channels Television. The Honorable Minister for State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Timmy Sylva, is our guest tonight in a special interview with him because of a very important and critical matter, and that's the petroleum industry law, which the President signed into law 2 days ago, but he's been speaking about it and saddled the Minister of State, Mr. Sylva, with the responsibility of implementation of the law. Thank you so much, Honorable Minister, for your time tonight. There is another concern of Pengasan and NUPENG that I'd like you to take on, and it's about the inclusion of Union on Regulators Board. Let me read what is said in their statement. And they said, quote, all civil societies and labor strongly clamored for the inclusion of the 2 unions in the sector to be on the board of the regulators for reasons of global best practice currently being practiced in most climes. How do you react to this? I'm not sure that is captured in the new law, Honorable Minister.
Well, so this law went through a lot of processes. It went through the National Assembly, a lot of public hearings to be passed. And I expect that some of these points that Labour is raising are supposed to have been canvassed at the National Assembly. But of course, I cannot come here to discuss all the details. I know that they were part of the board of PPPRA before now, but in a deregulated environment, I don't know whether it is necessary for Labour to be on the board of the authority or the commission. But in any case, as it is now, there is no provision for Labour on the board of these authorities. But we will look at it. I mean, the law has been passed. If there are issues, we will continue to discuss.
These unions have made references to other climes, and they say, according to them, that is global best practices.
Well, but they should have they should have made this point to the National Assembly. I am sure you are aware that there were public hearings. The National Assembly called for public hearings and asked for memoranda from the public. There were a lot of people who went to the National Assembly and presented and canvassed their position. I don't know why it is now that Labour is raising these issues with you, but frankly, I think these are issues that will be discussed.
The conversation I had with you when we're talking about the regulator for the sector is one of the issues that they've raised also. Let me read out what they said in their statement. They said, quote, "We have advocated for a single regulator in the industry and are still of the strong view that this will be in the best interest of the industry and the nation at large, as it would serve as one-stop shop for current and aspiring investors as far as regulatory steering is concerned." Minister,
when I hear this argument, I'm a little bit surprised. We are coming from more or less a single regulator position to a double regulator position. DPR was a single regulator, and we felt that DPR became very unwieldy. DPR could not span the whole industry, could not span the upstream all the way to the downstream. There are thousands, hundreds of thousands of filling stations to be regulated in Nigeria. DPR couldn't just handle it as to one single regulator. We are coming from there now, and this is supposed to be an improvement from where we are coming from. I don't know why people are saying we should go back to Egypt, where we have departed from Egypt a long time ago. A single regulator cannot be optimal. What we are saying is the double regulator at least makes it possible for the commission or the authority to become more efficient, because they will be smaller and smarter. And that's why it was decided. But of course, we are coming from this same place that they're expecting us to go back to. DPR was a single regulator. Now we have split DPR to two. And we have now even collapsed PEF, collapsed PPPRA, and absorbed them into the authority. I don't know what else they expect us to do, but I don't think that the optimal thing will be for us to have another DPR succeed DPR, which is what they are actually asking us to do if they are talking about a single regulator.
President Buhari spoke about loss of revenue. He said about over 50 billion US dollars has been lost in the last 10 years. How can these leakage or this kind of situation averted going forward?
Well, already I believe that we would have averted this situation now. Why did we lose that investment? In the past few years, about $50 billion in investment came to sub-Saharan Africa. Out of that, Nigeria was able to attract only $3 billion of the $50 billion that came to sub-Saharan Africa. And yet, we have the biggest reserves, and we are the biggest producer. Why that happened was because there was uncertainty in our environment, in our investment environment. Today with the PID, we have introduced that certainty, and we believe that a lot of that investment that is coming to sub-Saharan Africa will be destined to come to Nigeria now. So this, just the passage and the assent into the PIB has already ensured that we will be able to attract a lot more investments into Nigeria.
Aside that, can you tell Nigerians where your biggest fear lies when it comes to these leakages, where these monies are being lost to?
What leakages?
I mean, where we lost money. No, I'm not talking about investment. I'm talking about people talk about the transparency and the fact that monies are being lost in the land and goes into private pockets. Where is your biggest fear in the chain in the past, and perhaps where the law would have fixed?
No, we believe that the law will fix all those possible leakages. For example, the double regulators, the downstream sector can now be more smartly monitored, because there was, of course, a lot of leakage in the downstream sector and a lot of sharp practices that you know, even the subsidy sharp practices that we all know about. But at least now with the PIB, that leakage can be controlled, you know, and variously, we believe that the transparency also and the governance structure, is now entrenched in the PIB, which is going to really forestall any such leakages. Before now, there was no clear framework for transparency in our law, in our petroleum law. Now, there is a governance structure that is provided for in the PIB, and we believe now that all those leakages will be a thing of the past.
Some experts I have spoken to have said to me, sure, look, the problem is not about the law. We have laws in Nigeria, but the problem is about the seriousness to implement those laws. And in fact, one of the experts has said, the world will be looking at how serious Nigeria is, and it might not be immediate for how we can able to implement this new law. Just how serious are we in this new regime that we are entering into? Implementation is key. What are the assurances that you can give Nigerians tonight that implementation will be taken seriously?
I agree with you. The problem in Nigeria is not the laws, it's implementation. We are very aware of that, and that's why we are taking this implementation framework very seriously. We're going to hit the ground running. When we sit down, we will actually design a roadmap to achieving what we want to achieve. And then we will, based on that roadmap that we will design, we'll be able to now progress very systematically. And we believe that we will show the way in the oil industry that a law can be very efficiently operated even in Nigeria. And that's what we want to demonstrate next.
I'm not sure your explanation of yesterday pretty much satisfied some of Nigerians living within these oil-bearing communities of Nigeria. And 3% as against the conversation. In fact, at some point, it was 10% few years ago. And was a proposed proposition from the presidency or the executive of 5% in the initial stage. But at long last, it was the 3% that was passed. How do you convince Nigerians living in these terribly battered communities of the Niger Delta region, or all these oil-bearing communities, that 3% is sufficient?
Yeah, thank you very much. Look, when you say 10%, and a lot of people have mentioned this figure of 10%. First, you must ask 10% of what? And then you ask 3% of what? 10% was 10% of profit. And we believe that 10% of profit is subject to the companies declaring profit. And I can tell you, Shehu, that I know some companies, oil companies that have operated in Nigeria for a long time that have not once declared profit. So giving 10% to the host communities was like selling a dummy to the host communities. So we thought that the best thing was to go into the operational budget, and we take 3% of the operational budget, which must be spent, which is not negotiable. It's not, you can't argue about it because the budget is clear. What the company spent last year, it can be audited, and we can clearly get the figure, and then 3% of that. The budget of the oil sector for the last year was about $16 billion. So you can imagine the kind of numbers we're talking about. So if you want to gold plate, like some people do, or some oil company owners will give all the oil company, all the jobs to their own people. Now, if you say you want to do that, you do that. But we still have a piece of that action as host communities. We believe that this is the best deal. But of course, people always agitate. You know that when NDDC was given 3%, there was a lot of agitation too. There will always be agitation. But what is optimal now for the country? Because the host communities also will want this country to exist before they continue to become host communities. What is optimal? And what do we really want to achieve with this bill? This bill, we want to bring investors. We just told you now that we were able to attract only $3 billion out of $50 billion dollar investment fund. We want to be able to attract more. For example, the next tranche of $50 billion that is coming to sub-Saharan Africa for investment, we want to be in a position to attract at least $25 billion of investment to Nigeria. And if you are going to be able to attract $25 billion of investment out of that, then you must make sure that you are competitive. Now, if you come to Nigeria, they put the numbers, they look at our laws, and of course they will do the economics. They will see how much profit they will make, because of course as investors they want to make profits. So they take out the 3%, and the 3% of course will come from the operations. They will also charge that 3% to the operational cost. And by the time they charge everything there, including all their payments to NDDC, their payments to Tedford, by the time they put all that together, how much profit are they going to make in Nigeria? That is going to determine whether they will come to Nigeria. So we want to be sure that we are still an attractive destination. Let us bring the investors in. If the investors don't come and you have 20%, you will get less. But if you have 3% and a lot of investments come, you might get more. And in any case, even as a country, what is going to the federation account is from the profit. And if you begin to pile up costs at the operational end, and you pile up costs, that means that you are only going to be reducing what is going into the federation account at the other end. Because the money that will be, the profit that will be made will be less and less, because you are charging a lot on this side of the operational side. So whichever way you look at it, it's a balancing act. And we must realize the host communities want this country also to survive, I believe. And now I will take you, I know you haven't asked any question about the frontier.
I'll get there in a moment. Okay. And I know you are from one of the host communities. For example, Olaibiri, for example, from Ogbia local government area in Bayelsa State, it's about 65 years when that discovery was made. And people in that community are crying out of neglect of their community. They clean up in Ogoni land, hasn't really achieved much success or headway. The people in these communities are really battling developmental issues. And the question is that as a son of the soil, from the host communities, the question of how you are able to defend the 3% as against 5%, because the mathematics is simple, 3% cannot be larger than 5%.
No, of course, 3% cannot be larger than 5%. But for us here, we have considered that the 3% for the communities for now is quite optimal. NDDC was set up also for the purpose of intervening in the host communities, as you agree. As NDDC succeeded, the 13% derivation was also given to the states because of this same problem, and they succeeded. So a lot of funds are already going there, but it is because of the failure of these funds to successfully tackle the issue of host communities that we are now, on top of all this, coming with this host community fund. What was happening before was that the 3% was in most cases, the money going to NDDC was in most cases not being spent in the areas where the problem was. The 13% derivation was also not being spent in the areas where the problem was. This time, there is now a fund which is targeted at the host communities. That's what you must understand. This is the essential difference between what was happening. So yes, if it was happening, if it was such that the Ogbia community has not seen anything since then, at least now, there is another fund which the federal government has introduced on top of every other thing that is already existing, now to target the development of the host communities.
So where exactly will these funds go to, Minister? Where exactly will we get, which account will it go? Is it the local government or the traditional ruler or the state government? This is not going to any government structure. It is a structure that will be set up between the communities and the company. The company that is operating in the host community, they will set up a trust fund, and this trust will be developing and directly spending this money. It has nothing to do with government. That's why I said this is a fund that will now be targeted at the host communities. Host communities will make nominations into the trust. The companies will make nominations into the trust, and it will now target. And of course, the communities will come up with what they need. And it is now the company will now administer those contracts under their laws, under their structure. And of course, before now, we did not have the abandonment and decommissioning fund. Now, the PIA provides for an abandonment and decommissioning fund, which means that what happened in Ogoni cannot repeat itself again. If you are leaving, there is already a fund that you have contributed to that will be available to ensure that all the environmental issues that you have brought about in that area will be tackled from that fund. So that is also one of the fallouts of the PIA. All right, quickly, because a lawmaker that I spoke with it drew an ethnic configuration into the Exploration Frontier Fund. What exactly is the explanation towards this for a lot of Nigerians who perhaps are not getting it or are not happy with it?
Yeah, I agree that they are not really getting it because when you say Frontier Exploration Fund, you cannot continue to cream off your investment and never investing back. There are a lot of frontier territories. Everybody knows that we are at the last mile of the oil economy. And there is a lot of places in Nigeria where you still have possibility of finding crude, but we have not. We have those frontier territories, places where we believe we can find oil, but we have not found. That is what a frontier territory is. Now you have it in the north, you have that those territories in the north, you have frontier territories in the southwest, you have the Anambra Basin in the southeast, you have the Calabar Basin. There are so many frontiers in Nigeria. Now, how do you get funding to target exploration in these areas? Because we want to get as much oil as possible out of the ground before the oil era completely disappears. So now, one of the things we want to now achieve under this law, under the PIA, is to be able to create that fund. And that fund is coming from 30% of NMPC profit oil. That is the oil that belongs to NMPC. The profit they make on that, 30% will now be set aside for further exploration in frontier territories. It has nothing to do with the Federation crude. It is NMPC crude. NMPC, from the crude they have as a company, the profit from that crude, they are now mandated to set aside 30% of the profit that they make on the crude that belongs to them. Because of course, when there is crude, NMPC will take their share, Federation will take their share, and Minister, every other partner will take their share.
So quickly, because we are out of time. So I want to get, I wanted to get the update and the status of the Chad Basin exploration. What is the status of that?
Well, we have already found oil in Kulmani. I already announced that before. We found 1 million barrels in the ground, and already arrangements are ongoing to ensure that production begins. Chad Basin, of course, exploration is still ongoing, but of course in Kulmani, in the northeast, we've been able to strike a big find.
So beyond that, no infrastructure, no connection with the refining. What is the status from the last time? It looks very much the same from what you told us earlier.
No. It's so you find oil. There is a process to getting to drill and actually producing the oil. That process is ongoing. It is only after you produce that you can talk about refining and other infrastructure that you can put in place. But the first thing you have been able to achieve, which you can achieve, is to achieve the finding of the oil. And once you find the oil, then you can produce it. And now the process to produce that oil is ongoing.
Honorable Minister,
and usually this doesn't happen in 1-2 days. Usually, this industry is a long-term industry. I mean, when you're talking about the process, the time from finding oil to production can be sometimes 5 years, sometimes 3 years. That is the way it is. That is the normal, the norm in the industry. It's nothing new in this case.
We've done our bit tonight in getting Nigerians to be in the know. It is their right to be in the know. And Honorable Minister for State for Petroleum Resources, Mr. Sylva, thank you so much indeed for your time tonight explaining some of these details to us. Appreciate it.